Welcome everyone to our second meeting of the semester. And for those of you watching the YouTube, glad you took the time to watch this. But it's not muted. All right. I appreciate everyone coming here, and I have a few announcements to make. So this Saturday at noon, we will be having a social distanced hike at Pine Ridge Natural Area. And so for that, come at your own time. We're going to try to hit it at noon, but don't feel like it's a super hard commitment. Come in, meet a few folks, share stories, get to, I guess, chest up and see, oh, I've done more than you, you've done more than me. Just meet other people. And yeah, it was super fun the last time. We had a lot of people show up, and so hopefully we have a really successful one this Saturday as well. This Sunday, we have our second raptor monitoring outing of the year, where we will be going to Boyd Lake State Park, and it's a project run by CPW that we get to, I guess, host for the Boyd Lake State Park. And Grant will go a little bit more into detail about that right now.
Yeah, hey everybody. I really just kind of wanted to flesh some things out. First off, I wanted to thank everybody who came last week. It was a really great experience, or last time, not last week. We saw a lot. The weather was beautiful. It was a gorgeous day. We saw plenty of bald eagles for those who weren't there, plenty of bald eagles, red-tailed hawks, a peregrine falcon even. It was just a really great day to get out there, and hopefully, hopefully this weekend's weather will be, if not as nice, it'll be pretty close. Just with all that's going on now, with the huge cold blast we're getting, hopefully things will lighten up. I have the poll ready to send here in the chat. Just a few things about that. It is limited to 10 participants. So whoever signs up, the first 10, those are the first 10 who concretely will be going. And then I have it limited to a few other people who can sign up later, just as kind of a backup thing. If one person decides, oh, they can't go, or they have plans, or something doesn't work out, we have you as a backup option. So basically, if you sign up, you're not 100% guaranteed to go. I definitely kind of dropped the ball on that and making that really clear last time. But I will definitely try to respond and let everybody know if you're going or if you're not able to go sooner than I did last time. So hope to see you guys out there.
Super exciting. And so something else that Grant introduced last time that I'll kind of touch on is we are actually having you guys take data if you would like to. So you actually have some data writing experience. Super nice. And then last thing I have to bring up is our t-shirt contest. Originally, we set the date to have the submissions by tonight. We have changed that to the 23rd. So hopefully we can get a few more submissions. And so just to clarify, whoever's design wins. Go ahead and, all right, good. And just to reiterate what that contest is all about, submit your design for our new t-shirt that we'd like to print. You submit that to our email, which Serena will send in through the chat. And it does not have to be this most amazing, beautiful design you've ever made. I'm going to be submitting one, and I don't have hand-eye coordination. Quite literally, I do not. But I'm going to still draw something and throw it in there, and the people at the t-shirt company are going to touch it up, make sure that it all looks nice and fits on a shirt. And whoever wins the contest, once we do have that poll, will get a free shirt and will be accredited and announced within our newsletter and social media. So you'll get credit, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you can start making commissions. That'd be cool. And then once we have that design and we start printing, we'll be able to sell those to everyone who's interested. Yeah. So the new deadline for those submissions is the 23rd, and you submit those to our email, which will be sent in a second. And that is all I have announcement-wise. Our next meeting, I guess I say this now, will be March 2nd. Where we have a researcher from CPW speak for us. But tonight we have Mr. Kent, who is from the Wildlife Sanctuary, the Wild Animal Sanctuary here in Colorado. We're super happy to have him. And with that, I give it to you.
All right, thank you very much. First thing I'd like to do is a shout out to Talia there, just for setting this up and everything. So appreciate that. It's always good to see faces when you email back and forth. Totally unrelated, not totally unrelated, but you're talking about raptors. I don't know how many of you have been out to the sanctuary in the wintertime. From early November till late February, early March, we typically have anywhere normally from 30 to 40 migratory bald eagles that spend the winter with us. This year we've had days where closer to 50 of them. I'm sure they split their time between Barr Lake and us, but with our carnivore habitats and all the meat that gets left over, we just have bald eagles galore. We have one resident nest that we know about a mile north of the property, but all these I think are just migratory. You know, Colorado has a huge migratory bald eagle population every winter, so it's always great to see them. We have a lot of people that come out to the sanctuary just to do birding. We have lots and lots of raptors, a lot of harriers, lots of red tails. Occasionally, we've seen burrowing owls every once in a while. So there's quite a few different, all kinds of species of birds out there. I have a list in our tour guide book, and it has over 30 listed and I know I've left some off. So, because we've seen some flickers the last couple of years. Obviously they're not raptors, but so anyway, lots of raptors out there at the sanctuary if you ever want to come out and see them. The bald eagles, like I said, usually late February, early March is when they start to disappear, go north to nest or whatever it is that they do. So we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like I have permission to share my screen in a second here. I have a PowerPoint presentation, quite a few slides. I was in the military. I was a pilot in the Air Force for much of my life, and we used to talk about death by PowerPoint. Hopefully this isn't that bad. We have a number of embedded videos that are enjoyable to watch. So I'm the Director of Public Relations. I've been at the sanctuary or associated with it for about 12 years. I volunteered once or twice a week for about 5 years, and I've been working there full time for 7 years now. So I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. That's part of my job. I've given a lot of these presentations. Usually I can answer most questions within the presentation, but feel free on the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that, but if not, the question will be there at the end of the presentation. So I'll try to leave time for that. I think that's it. Not everyone, a lot of people, choose not to show themselves, which is all right. It's after hours or whatever the case may be. Typically here I would ask, how many people have at least heard of the Wild Animal Sanctuary? And then I usually ask how many people have been to the Wild Animal Sanctuary. I can't really tell. We have 28 participants, only about 8 people showing their faces. So I'm just going to assume many of you have heard about it at least. Believe it or not, it's the world's largest and oldest sanctuary dedicated to rescuing large carnivores. And we've been at it for 41 years now. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and get the PowerPoint going here, and then I'm going to go to the share screen, make sure I share the sound. That's always a biggie. I have 2 screens here. I'm at home right now. You can probably tell from my background. So let me get this going. Okay, now I got to do a little bit of minimizing. I'll just talk out loud while I'm doing this. And get to the share screen function. There it is. All righty. So hopefully right now, hopefully you're seeing some tigers. And then when we get to the first video, I'll be looking for a thumbs up just to make sure that everyone's hearing everything they're supposed to. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So we have a pretty screen there. Green, Colorado, is green April through July if we're lucky. People who move here from out of state don't realize how dry and brown it can be here in the wintertime, but certainly we have that right now. So here with these tigers, got 5 tigers. If you see the one second from the right, her name is Mary Jane. And Mary Jane was rescued from a gang leader in Chicago. So this gang leader was busted for some gang related activity, and they found out he had a tiger. On the far left, there's another tiger named Mary. Okay, so Sierra's the gang leader, Mary Jane. She was rescued from a truck stop in El Paso, Texas. At this truck stop, she was kept in a small cage, chain link cage, out by the diesel pumps of all things. And what that did was supposedly attract people to go to this place to buy their fuel. And you could actually go inside because they bred her extensively, and you could buy her cubs. And it sounds absurd. Most people don't realize that the state of Texas itself has more tigers owned by private individuals than there are in the wild. In the wild, there's only about 3,500 to 3,800 tigers estimated to be living in the wild in the world. There's about 4,000 tigers owned by individuals in Texas. So it's just a crazy situation. A lot of large carnivores out there. Those of us who have been in Colorado for a while, we don't even normally think about having exotics as pets or anything like that, or having them, because Colorado has some very strict laws against owning exotics. Hasn't always been that way. I'm old enough that way back in the 70s, I don't remember it so well, but you could actually buy a lion cub or see a lion cub at a pet shop in Denver. And that just sounds crazy to us. But there's still 4 states, and we'll talk about them as we go along, 4 states in the country that have no laws against owning exotic animals. And some are very strict, like Colorado. And then there's 4 states that have no statewide law against keeping animals like this. So we'll just go ahead and continue here. The other 3 tigers that I didn't mention, they came from a place called, of all things, Tiger Rescue in Colton, California. Turned out to be a killing field for big cats. When they went in and raided the place and confiscated the animals, they found 58 dead tiger cubs in freezers, the carcasses all over the property as well. We luckily got 13 tigers out of there and 5 leopards. 2 of those leopards had been stashed in an air conditioning duct. They were just small cubs in an attempt to hide them from the authorities, but fortunately we were able to get them. So my purpose isn't to just kind of shock you with bad stories tonight. The good news is, you know, we're at the other end of the rainbow where these animals have an incredible life, but I want to let you know what's going on with exotic wild animals, not just here in the United States, but all around the world. So we'll go ahead and get going. We'll get a look here at what we're going to do. So we're going to talk specifically about our mission. We're going to talk about the sanctuary here in Keensburg, Colorado, which is where I work, about 30 miles northeast of Denver. So from Fort Collins, obviously it's going to be southeast. Takes about an hour and 10 minutes when we have to go up to the CSU vet school. So we're very familiar with that trek there. And then we're going to talk about our refuge, which is a piece of property we have down in the southern part of the state of Colorado. We just acquired it a little bit less than 3 years ago. And then less than a year ago, we acquired or took over the operation of a sanctuary down in Texas. We're going to talk about the problem of exotic wildlife and how that got started. Then we're going to talk a little bit about rescues themselves, and then how people can be engaged with our work. So let me just, I got to do some rearranging here on my screen. So let's get started. So our mission, as you probably gathered, we rescue animals, and we specialize in large carnivores: bears, lions, tigers, wolves, mountain lions, foxes, bobcats, lynxes, coyotes. We have some lynxes, I mentioned, leopards, jaguars, basically animals with sharp claws and sharp teeth, carnivores. We do rescue some non-carnivore animals. Typically, they come as part of the package. For example, we have a horse that we rescued. We went and got a tiger from this old lady in Oregon who could no longer care for her tiger. She also couldn't care for her horse. So when we went and got the tiger, we brought the horse back with us. So occasionally we end up with some animals that are not carnivores, or animals that really just need a home. Like we ended up with some ostriches a few years ago that were living in the back of a parking lot down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So we rescue animals from illegal and or abusive situations. Very often it's illegal and abusive. And then we rehabilitate them psychologically, socially, physically, so that they can then live freely in large acreage natural habitats, while educating people about what we call the captive wildlife crisis in the US and around the world. So the rehabilitation takes place on many levels. Most of the animals show up physically in very poor shape, usually from a lack of adequate nutrition. But quite honestly, and I'll just be kind of blunt, they're kind of messed up in the head because of the situations they've been in. And then socially, very often they don't even know what they are because they've never been raised with their own kind. Many of the animals we get come from places where people pay to play with cubs. And in order to accomplish that, they take the cubs away from mom, typically at birth, so that the animals get used to being handled by people. And so they don't even know who their mother is. They get separated. We have lions that show up that don't even know how to roar because they've never been around another lion to stimulate that before. So there's a lot of rehabilitation that takes place. Fortunately, a lot of it just kind of takes place organically as the animals once get moved into a healthier environment. But in some cases, we have to take actual steps to help get them on the road to recovery. So our current sanctuary, or the main sanctuary, which is up in Keansburg, consists of 789 acres. And we have about 520 lions, tigers. I don't usually say bears in that order: lions, bears, tigers, mountain lions, and large carnivores. So it's very large. And I'll give you a little bit of a history here in a moment about how we got started. When we moved to this location in 1994, we started with 160 acres, and we've since grown it out to the current 789. But 789 acres isn't enough for as big of a problem as there is. So in March, April of 2018, just about 3 years ago, we acquired an almost 10,000 acre refuge in southern Colorado. 10,000 acres is huge. So here we got this map. You can kind of see where we're located up here at Keansburg, Fort Collins, made the map up here, and we got a grizzly bear. You don't normally see grizzly bears in Colorado. I don't know if any ever wander down from Wyoming. You folks would know that better than I, but we have grizzlies down there, so that's why I used a grizzly bear. And it's way down there by the town of Springfield. It's about a 4-hour drive from our location to get down there. Very, very, very remote. Most of the time when people think of Eastern Colorado, they just think of flat prairie dogs, sagebrush. You would think, what kind of place is that? Well, this place is somewhat of an anomaly in the state of Colorado and Eastern Colorado. And if you look at a topo map here, you can kind of get a sense of it. Well, first of all, look at the size. It's almost 5 miles north to south, 3 miles east to west. It's a former cattle ranch. And you can kind of see all the kind of fingers and a lot of terrain. And it's, like I said, somewhat of an anomaly for southeastern Colorado. It's called the Canyonlands. And I'll show you a few pictures of it here in a moment. Here's another picture showing, it's more of a satellite view. All those little green specks you see aren't shrubs, they're actually trees. It's almost covered with a juniper forest. But you can see, and we'll zoom in a second here, all the different habitats that we already have built down there or are currently working on. And these aren't small habitats. We'll look at it here. We have a black bear habitat that's 243 acres. So one of the things that sets the Wild Animal Sanctuary apart from most sanctuaries is that instead of measuring the habitats or the enclosures in square feet, we measure in acres. If you're out at the Wild Animal Sanctuary northeast of Denver, typically anywhere from 3 to 5 to 20 acre size habitats. Down here, they're much larger. So we have our black bear habitat, 243 acres, 103 acres for grizzlies. This red one here, it's one of our first big cat habitats. That's about 35 acres. I've got a big lion habitat we just built this summer. That's about 50 acres. So we'll take a look at a happy tiger down there. When I'm on my computer at home, I don't have enough USB ports, so I don't have my mouse, and sometimes it takes a little bit to find the touchpad mouse. So this is Bailey and his brother Boudiche. They live in this 35 acre habitat. So you can kind of see the juniper forest that's there. Our grizzly bears, we have about a dozen grizzly bears down there right now. Incredibly happy. This is Miss Montana. She was rescued from the Wildlife Way Station along with a number of other animals outside of LA. They closed their doors in summer of 2019, and we've got a whole bunch of animals from them. This is Pooh. She was rescued with another female grizzly from a private owner in Texas. The neat thing about this picture is you can actually see her stretching out and moving. She has the ability with that much acreage and terrain and everything to really get out and move those muscles. And so you can see her front left forelimb is stretched out, her right rear. So she can really move. Bears are made to move. So it's a great opportunity for them to get out and do what they do. They aren't stuck pacing back and forth along a small fence or something like that. And then we have lots and lots of wolves. We probably have somewhere between 25 and 30 wolves down at the refuge right now. Here's a couple of them. This picture was taken during the summertime. You can tell. Looks like your dog laying underneath a tree cooling off after a run or something. But we have a whole bunch of wolves. And most of them are in pairs or groups of 3 to 5. We try to put them in packs if we can. It takes a little bit of work, but it's worth it for the animals because they have such a drive for social interaction. But we were starting to run out of room, and so, no, I take that back. So that's why we got the refuge. We were starting to run out of room at Keansburg. We tried to buy land nearby, but people weren't selling. And so once we decided to look farther afield, we thought, well, let's find a place that has all the amenities that the place in Keansburg doesn't. So that's why the refuge, we found a place that has lots of trees, lots of rock formations, lots of grass, lots of terrain and everything. But now I'm going to talk about the refuge down in Texas. Used to be called the International Exotic Animal Sanctuary. It's been in existence about 28 years. But about a year ago, the main driving person behind it, he grew to be old, like we all do, got to be about in his early 80s, I believe it was. But he had a bad cancer diagnosis. And he had this sanctuary down there. It's about 41 acres, had about 70 animals. And he didn't want to close it down for a couple of reasons. It would be a double whammy. One is you'd be removing a good sanctuary from the system of sanctuaries. But the other thing is those 70 animals would have to find a new home. And that would be taking up space at other sanctuaries that took them in. And so he thought the best solution would be to find someone else to run it. And doing his due diligence, he looked at sanctuaries that have the kinds of animals that they do, which is also large carnivores. And he saw that, at least in his opinion, the best run and the best place was the Wild Animal Sanctuary. So he approached us early last year and asked if we would just take over operation of it. So it's a self-sustaining entity. It's been run really quite well. And so we've just kind of put our umbrella over it, and we've kind of streamlined a few processes to help them a little bit, but in general, it just continues to function. We branded it under our name just because we have a little bit more national recognition after 41 years to help with fundraising and things like that. So it's about 30 miles, as you can see, northwest of Fort Worth, about 70 animals, mostly bears. And most of the bears live in really nice, bigger habitats. We'll take a look at some of the pictures here of their animals. Well, that's an overview of the property. A whole collection of animals, bears, lots of bears, and they have trees. Black bears, as you know, love trees. Got a bobcat there, got a few coatimundis, got a little ocelot there. And then just about 2 weeks ago, they got a brand new cheetah. This is the first cheetah we've ever had in our sanctuaries, any one of them. And she is left over from the SSP program, the Species Survival Program that AZA zoos participate in for the conservation of species. She's only about 7 years old, but the SSP program either figured they had enough of her genetics that they didn't need her anymore, so they looked for a place to retire her. Dalila here, as they pronounce her name, she has about 1.5 acre long habitat. So at 7 years of age, she still likes to run. She's very active, and so she's doing real well. Just as you know, incredible cats. Neat thing about the cheetahs, as you know, you can see those claws out. I always call them cleats. That way they can get the traction that they need when they're zipping up to 65, 70 miles an hour. So we got a video coming up here. And this video snapshot covers the Bolivia lion rescue. Exactly 10 years ago today, February 16th, 2011, 25 African lions were flown into DIA from Bolivia. And what had happened was in 2009, Bolivia passed a national law banning circus animals. They gave the circus owners a certain amount of time to come into compliance with the law. And after that time period was up, if the circuses still had animals, they were confiscated. So among the hundreds of animals that were confiscated from circuses were 25 African lions. The Bolivia government and the other organization that was helping them didn't want to break up family groups if they could. So they looked really long and hard to try to find places that would be able to take multiple lions at a time rather than one here, one there, or whatever the case may be. Well, they got a hold of us and we said, no, we'll take all 25. So this little snapshot was done by a local news station. And while you're watching it, just a couple things to look for. First of all, see the animals and habitats, but also notice the elevated walkway. And we'll talk about that if I remember as soon as this video is over. So as soon as this starts, if I can just get a thumbs up that you're hearing it. I don't think I consciously shared the sound. Let me do that right now. Share sound, and then it should work. So we'll advance to the next slide, and hopefully you'll see this and hear it. If I can get my mouse to switch screens here, there we go.
Oh, it's a beauty of.
Oops, why is it doing that? A little bit of a delay. I'm going to back up one more, and then we'll hopefully get it to auto start again. If like I said, I'm struggling with my mouse because the way the screen.
Oh, it's a beauty of a tiger, isn't she? She's a big one. Oh, I'm here at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside of Denver, Colorado, and I'm only a few miles outside of the city, but I'm on safari for lions and tigers and bears, more animals than you can believe. So I can see everything up here on this Mile into the Wild walkway. What a walkway. I've seen grizzlies, leopards, wolves. I've seen more animals in 10 minutes than I've seen in my whole life. Now let's go check out the Bolivian lion house. This lion biosphere was built to care for 25 lions rescued from a Bolivian circus. Here the lions acclimate to their new Colorado home. Hi, Becca.
Hi.
So you're the head animal caretaker here, is that right?
Correct.
Caregiver.
Yes.
And what does that mean?
It means that we take care of the animals from everything from cleaning, feeding, medical needs, anything that they need, we take care of.
So you're pretty familiar with all the animals here, I'm guessing.
Yes.
And so for an untrained eye, it looks like these guys are napping.
Yes.
Is that the technical term for what they're doing?
If they were in the wild, they'd more likely be reserving energy for hunts later in the evening. But these guys here, you know, food's delivered to them, so this is just them enjoying being a lion.
What do you guys feed them?
Predominantly, we have two sources of food. One is a block that we actually purchased that is made specifically for big cats. It has certain nutrients and things like that. And then another is a block that we actually make here ourselves that we add vitamins to that comes from organizations like Walmart and stuff like that that allows us to make our own block.
I mean, when we came up, these guys were all laying all over each other and cuddling. Are these guys a little family, or did they know each other before they got here?
These guys actually are a family. The coolest thing about the Bolivian rescues is when they came from the circuses, a lot of them, you know, were bred from within two parents in that circus. So when they got here, they were still in family units like they would be in the wild. These guys were already that unit, and it's really cool to see that because we don't have it.
This really is a little family.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable what you guys are doing here.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
doing that.
Thank you.
All righty. If you need another reason not to get a tiger as a pet, look at those canine teeth. I always like to point those out. A lot of people must not consider that, but anyway, they'll hurt you. All right, Preston, welcome. So the problem, how did this become such a problem? So I'm going to advance here. Let me just fill in a few little bullet points. So we're going back to the 70s now. Our founder and executive director, his name is Pat Craig, grew up outside of Boulder, Colorado. He started rescuing these animals, started this whole business 41 years ago when he was in his first year of college, just to give you an idea. And what had happened was he got a tour at a zoo behind the scenes because a friend of his worked there. This was a zoo back in North Carolina. And he saw 6 or 7 tigers in small cages behind the scenes. He saw the 2 or 3 typical display animals, asked the logical question, first of all, what are these tigers doing back here? And he was told, well, they were raised in the nursery, but we don't have room for them, so this is where we keep them. Next logical question, do they ever get to go out in the bigger area? Well, no, they don't, because people know who the display animals are, plus it's very difficult to move the animals. Next logical question, what's going to happen to them? Well, we try to find homes for them. Most zoos have the same problem, so they'll probably be euthanized. So he just couldn't live with the whole idea that these animals were being brought into the world because animals in the nursery attract people and people bring money, knowing that they would probably be euthanized. So we came back to Denver, Colorado. This is about 1978, 79, way before most of you people. But he went to the Denver Zoo and they had the exact same problem, 6 or 7 tigers in the back and just 2 or 3 out front. So we asked the question, is there any kind of place that can rescue these animals, that can take care of them? And back in the late 70s, we were hardly out of the whole concept of dog pounds. So the whole idea of sanctuaries, rescues, adoptions, and what we've developed now over the last few decades really didn't exist, and certainly didn't exist for exotic animals. So he was told that, no, there's nothing like that. So he just chose to take care of the problem himself. So at the time, how did all these animals end up so that there's 4,000 tigers in Texas? So the zoos had this huge surplus of animals, which planted the seed. However, at the time, there were no laws against keeping exotics because it had never been a problem before. You don't typically have a law for something that doesn't exist. So zoos, rather than euthanizing the animals, they found out that, wow, we can sell them to people out in the public. There's people out there that will buy a tiger or a lion. Because there were no laws stopping breeding and selling of these animals, it just mushroomed in size. So ever since then, we've been fighting the battle state by state. As I said, I'll be showing you a map here in a moment or two of kind of giving you a breakdown of the different levels of laws that different states have. We have found that education is the key to bringing an end to this. Just people finding out, first of all, that the problem exists, but also not supporting the kind of places that have captive wildlife. And internationally, I wrote this slide long before coronavirus. Like a virus, it's an international problem. It's spread all around the world, especially as countries have gotten more affluent. And when people have more disposable income, they do goofier things with their money, if you will. And buying an exotic animal is one of them. So in this next video, it's just kind of a video snapshot of the sanctuary. It was just put together this last May. We had a film crew out there. They were trying to pitch us to Nat Geo, Animal Planet, or one of those things. I think once they saw the success of Tiger King on Netflix last spring, they wanted to do something like that. So they just kind of, it's a vignette of different things. Notice there's a lot of talk about our refuge property, the 10,000 acre property in the southern part of the state. And as I always like to say, notice the happy animals.
Hi, sweetheart.
Good boy.
Hi, Kamala. Hi, Karma. Hi, Kayla.
What are you doing? The Wild Animal Sanctuary is a place where animals hopefully can be heard. They can be given individualized care.
Noelle. Ooh, are you gonna play in your pool?
And hopefully given back what we as human beings have taken from them.
It's a little over 500 animals. We specialize in large carnivores, but we still have a myriad of other things. And there's lions, tigers, bears, leopards, wolves, hyenas, foxes, horses, camels, donkeys, kangaroos, pigs. We're the only sanctuary in the United States that does large acreage habitats. The refuge is basically as close to wild as possible.
About 85% of the animals here today are legal confiscations, either through local law enforcement or state or federal agencies. We average about 70 to 100 animals a year.
It definitely takes a unique individual. You have to be so driven and so dedicated to the animals that you're willing to do anything and everything. And so I know how hard it can be and how much wear and tear on your body it is. We pick up from 70 Walmarts every single day. There's anywhere from 200 to 300 barrels that get sorted, washed, and back on the truck. Taylor is the only animal caretaker that lives on site, so she works 7 days a week. So we're going to our 60-acre wolf habitat.
There's always stuff to do out here.
What's up, puppies?
I'm not one to just kind of sit around. I kind of constantly need to be moving. All of our animals have different personalities.
What's up, babies? So we're releasing the 3 baby bears today to start the process of getting them out into the habitat. It's okay. Go ahead and just leave it open, right?
Releasing an animal from a lockout into an actual habitat is a big step.
It's all right.
The animals here, a lot of them came from situations that were extremely unnatural, concrete floors, very small spaces.
Your sister's exploring.
Since they don't have a mom, they kind of see us as a surrogate.
There you go, buddy.
Good boy.
Now we're talking. Aye.
Just seeing them explore these things for the first time, it's just an amazing step.
What's up, pretty girl? Huh? How are you? There you go. When we're building the habitats, we definitely look at who's going to be going in it and what species it is and try and tailor that habitat to the needs of that specific animal.
I found a different meaning since you came in my life. Now all of time is standing still, shining so bright.
The refuge is a little less than 10,000 acres. Canyon lands, caves, cliffs. You could take an animal out of the greatest zoo in the United States and the refuge would be an upgrade.
And it feels like home, it feels like home.
Seeing their emotions, seeing their eyes, seeing them live the life that they were meant to have, that's the thanks that really keeps you going.
Like all of a sudden you'll see that shell break and a big sigh of relief. Just letting go. It's very rewarding to see that, and especially when you know you've had the opportunity to be a part of it.
All righty, so this is a map, shows where current rescues came from. If we went back all 41 years for animals that have passed on, probably pretty much every state would have animals in it. You can kind of see there's a little belt in the Midwest there, kind of the Ohio, Indiana, Virginia area. Tends to be kind of problematic where we've gotten a lot of animals from. We're the only carnivore sanctuary in the country that rescues internationally. So we have a lot of international rescues from Mexico, Canada, Spain, Argentina. We've helped with some zoos that were shut down there. Uruguay, we got some lions, the Bolivia lions. Saipan is a little island out by Guam in the Pacific. Got 3 lions from a bad zoo situation in South Korea. So we do rescue internationally. So here's that map I've been talking about. If you look at Colorado, it's dark blue, and that means they banned pretty much all exotic animals for people having them as pets. The next level down would be like Kansas, Nebraska. It has kind of that hatched look to it. Those are states that usually ban the big 3, primates, bears, and the big cats. But they might allow other animals, smaller, lesser animals, if you will. Then you have states like Texas, and this is how they know there's about 4,000 tigers in private owners' hands in Texas. They don't prohibit the keeping of animals. They just require you to have a permit. And it's not a permit that's made to make it difficult for people. In some counties, the tiger permit's $15. So it's pretty crazy. And then you have the 4 states, Nevada, Wisconsin, Alabama, and North Carolina, that have no statewide laws against keeping exotic animals. There might be particular municipalities or counties that prohibit it, but on a statewide, there's no statewide law that prevents that. So we'll take a look at a rescue here. I'll flick through the next slide. This took place about 4 years ago now. It's hard to believe that. Up in Spearfish, South Dakota, so up kind of by Mount Rushmore, not too far from here. There was a sanctuary that began with really good intentions, like a lot of things do. But the owner of the place never said no. You can't take every animal that needs a home. I mean, we would like to, but you just can't. No one has the resources for that. And so eventually he got overrun both with exotic rescues and domestic. And he also didn't practice birth control with any of the animals. So there were cats everywhere, there were dogs everywhere, there was waterfowl everywhere. And then he started, whether he got overwhelmed, had some kind of emotional breakdown or something, he fired all of his volunteers, quit accepting food. So the USDA stepped in and said, we got to do something here. So initially the Wild Animal Sanctuary was asked to go up there and rescue 3 animals. We left with 24. This video is narrated by Becca once again. You saw her in the first video, you just saw her in the second one. She's our director of animal care. She started volunteering at the sanctuary right out of high school about 23 years ago. She probably knows more about large carnivore husbandry than just about anyone in the country, because there's no other place that has hundreds of large carnivores where someone's worked with this many for so long. You'll actually see her. She's inside a transfer cage with a black bear. The black bear is tranquilized, so don't worry about that. So we'll go ahead and watch that. This is our largest animal on the property. This is a Kodiak grizzly bear. He was rescued from an amusement park in Florida. His name is Jake. He weighs about 1,600 pounds in the summer. Right before he goes into hibernation, he's probably up around 1,750 or so. So he's just an enormous animal. His head is as big around as my arms without exaggerating at all. An incredible creature. So we'll get started here on this video.
I think sometimes it's easy to forget just how scary that moment is when we come into these animals' lives. I mean, no matter how rough their living conditions, it's all they've ever known. It's their home. They don't know what's on the other side of that fence. Sometimes they're excited to go with us, to get out of there. Other times it's like leaving everything they know behind. But to see where they're going, to experience that joy the first moment they step into the habitat, to see the emotional and physical damage just melt away. I really think that's why a lot of people come to the sanctuary, why they adopt one of these creatures, why they care so incredibly much. It's not just because they want to help. I think it's because it changes us inside too. We see ourselves in these animals. We know what it's like to go through hard times, to experience incredible, terrifying transitions. I mean, we've all been there. When people experience these animals, it's powerful. Not just because of how beautiful and how majestic they are, but because of where they came from. Just like us, their present was written through the stories of their past. It's incredibly impactful. It's beautiful, and it changes you immensely. I've been working with these animals for years, and I feel incredibly honored to be part of their journey, to help them make that transition into a beautiful life, to give them a voice because they've never had one of their own.
All right, how can people become engaged with our work? One is simply visit. We're open 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to sunset. We only close 4 days a year, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, and Independence Day. So people can visit, or like a lot of us who work there, or just volunteer. We have about 140 volunteers or so. When all the bears are awake, we have over 200 bears. When the bears are awake, not hibernating, we're feeding about 80,000 pounds of food a week. Right now, it's only about half that because the bears are denned up. Finally, obviously, people can donate if they want. We have wish lists. Financial donations are always appreciated. So that brings us to the end. You can go to our website, wildanimalsanctuary.org. There's a lot more information, a lot more videos and pictures about the animals and everything. We have a Facebook page. Even if you don't have Facebook, it's a public page. And then other social media, Instagram and things like that. So let me get out of this share screen mode, and then I'll see if there's any chat questions. And Used to be some nesting Goldens. Yeah, I don't know, that looks like maybe a side conversation. I haven't seen any Goldens out there. You know, Goldens, I think, tend to live more up in rockier climates or areas. We see a lot of immature balds, so they look kind of like a Golden. They don't have the white head, white tail. And a lot of people will mistake an immature bald for a Golden. I don't believe we have any Goldens out at the sanctuary, just kind of throwing in my 2 bits. Let's see what else. Got that, Raptors. Our tour was unfortunately cut short, but it's quite interesting, bummer. Can you speak about internships? So we do offer internships to college students. The main one we offer, well, we offer one that can either help the development team or help me in public relations. We have occasional education ones where people will develop some kind of educational program for us. The big ones are animal husbandry. I think we asked for 120 hours minimum, and you can work out the scheduling on how often you come in and everything. The big thing to keep in mind with internships, probably not as big a problem for you because you're in Colorado already, is we don't have any kind of housing. We do have a link to it. So if you go to our wildanimalsanctuary.org, there's a drop-down menu under ways to help, and then it goes down to internships. And if you, there's a link there, I think, to get more information. So if you want to pursue that, you can. Okay, someone wants to ask an audio question, work opportunities. How do I get my position? And let's see if anyone wants to jump in there.
I have a question, Kent.
Yes, sir.
What's your breeding program, or are all the animals neutered and spayed?
Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, I'll answer that first part. It sounds like you might have a 2-parter or something.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one thing, and a lot of times we'll get people that want to come out and, you know, they have their degree in wildlife conservation, wildlife biology, and we do not participate in conservation. Granted, we have a lot of animals that are endangered, that are threatened or whatever, wherever they lie on the scale there, but we don't participate in conservation. So all of our animals are spayed or neutered, and we don't allow our animals to reproduce because otherwise we would be overwhelmed. You know, tigers and lions have no problem reproducing in captivity. That's why they're so easy to obtain. So we don't participate in it. The other thing is most conservation programs have no interest in our animals because our animals are considered to be generic or mutt. So like our tigers, you know, I think they've just recently changed the classification of tigers. Traditionally, at one time there was 9 subspecies, then we were down to 6, and now I think they just have 2 big blocks, the ones that live on mainland and then the others that don't. I might have to look that up. But basically 6 subspecies of tigers, whether it's an Amur, Siberian, a Bengal, a Sumatran. But these people that have had these for the last X number of decades, they've just crossed stripes with stripes to get stripes. So we don't have genetically pure animals as far as subspecies goes, and we have no record at all, like the SSP has, of their family tree. And so really what we do is we just try to make right what humans have messed up. These animals, of course, once they've been raised in captivity, can never be released into the wild. And so we just do our best to give them the best home possible in a captive situation. So we don't strictly do conservation. And I know a number of you in this that happen to be in this particular campus, you know, club on the Wildlife Society. That's a big interest of yours, which is incredible because obviously we need have a great need for conserving species. But that's not what we do. We give our animals a great home, but we really we're not participating in any kind of, you know, breeding program or anything like that, Joshua.
Thank you. That answers all my questions. I appreciate it.
Okay.
I'll jump in. So I had a question about the refuge that you guys have down in Southeast Colorado. So what do you guys do? That I've been down there. I do a lot of conservation work down there with the native species, the native ecology, the native habitat. What do you guys do down there to mitigate your effects on the natural environment and on the wildlife that's already there? Because I know it's super biodiverse, and we just got a question about that.
Yep. Nope. I might have to go to share screen again. So let me see if I can get this. So if you remember that that picture of the map, and I showed the 243 acre, 103 acre, that doesn't show the spaces between the habitats. We actually just wrote about this in our newsletter coming out. Since the cattle ranch is gone, it's been gone now almost 3 years, we've had a great return of more of the natural species that are there, whether it's migratory deer herds, elk herds. We have native bears that occasionally work their way there. We've seen mountain lions and bobcats. So now that there's not cattle there all the time, cattle, grazing the grass down, and the ranchers that, go along with cattle, we've actually seen a lot more native animals return to that piece of property. Plus, we're not there shooting, coyotes and stuff like most ranchers will do. But what we do, and we work very closely with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they have to inspect every habitat we build before we close it off to the outside world. So before we actually put up the last gate, the last fence, it has to be inspected to make sure that we're not displacing any, like a bobcat den or something like that. So we work closely with CPW on that. But those habitats, they all have spaces between them. So migratory animals, native animals, they can just work their way through the habitats. We see it up here at Keensburg. We have coyotes that live, we have native foxes, we have deer that work their way through the property. They might do it a little bit more at night in a lot of cases, but coyotes and foxes might do that anyway. That's a big concern of ours. A lot of people thought when we moved down there that we would just put one big perimeter fence around that 10,000 acres and just block the whole world off. The main perimeter fence is still just the barbed wire fence that the rancher used. And of course, deer can go over it, antelope go under it, everyone else just goes through it. It's a very porous fence other than for cattle. So the native wildlife still come and go onto the property. They just might have a 35-acre habitat where they can't get in because tigers are in there. But that's probably a good thing for a deer because they probably don't want to encounter a tiger. Hopefully I answered your question. Like I said, we've actually seen an improvement in the wildlife down there since the cattle ranch is no longer there and we're there with our animals.
Do you guys ever work with like other conservation organizations or anything like that to do like surveys of the property and see what kind of stuff is there?
We've had a lot of requests to do that, and I know we've let some people onto the property. I hate to say it, sometimes we tend to be a little bit insular just because the more people you have there looking around and everything, the more people that want to try to control you, and that too. So. And then that's going to be detrimental to our being able to care for the animals too. So it already has more access than it ever has with the ranchers that have had it the last however many years prior to us taking it over.
Right, cool, thank you.
I have a question. Do you feel like the U.S. is anywhere close to resolving in putting in place in laws to prevent the trade in wildlife and keeping wildlife as pets?
It's getting there. So as that one slide said, it's been state by state. 6 years ago, there were 5 states that didn't have any laws, and now we're down to 4. South Carolina became one of those hatched ones where they prohibit the primates, the big cats, and the bears. It's a slow process, but I don't know how many of you dared watch Tiger King on Netflix last March and April. So it showed Joe Exotic. He had this place called Greater Wynnewood Exotic Animal Park south of Oklahoma City. He's now serving a 22-year prison sentence because of a murder for hire and his violations of the Endangered Species Act. But since then, there have been a couple of other places that have had to shut their doors. So just that 64 million people was the last number I saw who actually viewed Tiger King. So it really, in a way, has kind of shined a little bit more of a spotlight on the whole problem, and that's helped. So we're getting there. And then just recently, Congress, at least the House of Representatives, passed what's called the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And that's going to, if it gets approved by the Senate eventually and becomes national law, it's going to really shut down the ability to move these animals across state lines and to breed them. But it's a slow process. I mean, it's like, just people's whole mentality on what they think of animals has to change before it's going to happen. There's still a lot of resistance in some places on, people saying that you can't have a tiger or whatever, and that. But so Jacob, I think I see your name there. It's happening. It just doesn't happen as fast as most of us would like, especially because we know that until the problem goes away, there's animals that are suffering. And sadly, I mean, even where we have very good laws, animals still suffer. I mean, we just have to, you can watch TV and see the advertisements where dogs are tied up out in the cold or whatever the case may be. So we live in an imperfect world, but I think in this area, we're moving in the right direction. It's just taking a while. Kind of quiet.
Yeah, I have actually one question. So that part of Southeast Colorado, I know, is super diverse in herpetofauna, and I know specifically there's like a few spots there that have some really, like, I think they're state endangered species of shorthorn lizards. So I was wondering if there was any talk about, how you plan to kind of like work with those more, I guess, vulnerable species in that part of the state.
Yeah, so that some of these questions are above my pay grade, if you will. That's why we have an executive director and board of directors, and I know our board of directors and the executive director have been approached by, because there are horned lizards down there. There's, like you said, a couple of pockets, and I'm not sure. They're pretty specific, and I don't know well enough if our property has been identified as one that they really suspect that they're there. I know there's some nearby, so like I said, some of that's above my pay grade, and I'm not sure what we've agreed to as far as possibly letting some conservation groups in to do a survey of that. So we're not totally averse to it. It just has to be done, in a way that isn't going to keep us from rescuing animals, but at the same time, trying to protect the species that already exist there. So I don't have the specific answer for you as far as what we've agreed to and who we're working with, but I know it's been addressed. So
thank you. If there are any other questions, please interrupt me and ask them. But with it being 7 p.m., I would like to thank all of you for taking your time tonight to listen to Kent talk about the wildlife sanctuary. It was a very enlightening talk, and there was a lot of really neat information that's been shared. So, glad we could have him. And yeah, so a few reminders. We have our social distance hike this Saturday. There should be an email sent out soon with that. If you haven't signed up for Aftermowing yet, please, by all means, please sign up. Even if you aren't in those first initial 10, there's a chance that you'll be able to fill in some spots that open up. And yeah, next meeting is on March 2nd. Super excited for that one with some Jake Ivan, I think is his name. So he's a neat guy. And yeah, hopefully you guys have a good night. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, if you have any more questions, please feel free to stay for a minute and ask Kent if that's all right.
Yep, that's fine. I just put my email address there in the chat too. So if anyone has thinks of something, at 1 o'clock in the morning, they can get up and email me or something. Casey asked something. Is that the same case with the sanctuary's bears? So Casey, are you still here? If so, yeah, I see you. What specific question related to the bears there?
All right. You're mentioning this with respect to the, shall we say, you're mentioning that a lot of the big cats that you had at the sanctuaries were viewed as generic, quote unquote, due to their unknown heritage, likely incorporating many distinct subspecies and land races of tigers and lions and etc. Is that the case with your bears, given the fact that there are, well, a lot fewer subspecies and distinct subpopulations as well, or is it about the same regardless?
No, it's well, partly, bears aren't nearly as threatened, so there's not as much demand for wanting to, breed black bears. With black bears, obviously, they're pretty much a species unto themselves, a North American black bear. I mean, there's variations depending on what part of the country you live in. Where we see a lot of hybridization is between grizzly bears and Syrian brown bears. So a Syrian brown bear is basically a grizzly bear, but it evolved in Southeast Asia rather than Northern North America or Alaska. And there's a lot of crossbreeding between grizzlies and Syrian brown bears. And and sometimes you can't tell. Syrian brown bears tend to have kind of a light colored collar around their shoulders and down their chest. They tend to be smaller than our North American grizzlies, like we might find in Montana or Wyoming or something like that. So that's where there's a lot of hybridization is between those two species. And then, you know, there's just so many variations among grizzly bears, whether you have, you know, a Kodiak grizzly, you have, you know, just kind of depends whether they're a coastal brown bear of Alaska, very specific coastal brown bear like a Kodiak, or the ones that are a little bit more mainland that you might find at Denali National Park or, you know, in Yellowstone or something. So it's not nearly as big of a problem, but because they're not nearly as endangered as, say, the species of tigers, we haven't ever been really approached by bear breeders or anything, just because there's just so many bears in general that are out there. But there's definitely a hybridization among grizzlies and Syrian brown bears.
No, thank you. I wasn't aware of that sort of nuance of the bear trade in captivity.
All righty, looks like no more hands, no more voices speaking up. So, well, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you folks inviting me over tonight.